Okay.
You can keep yours just on all the time.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to full council this evening, Tuesday the 7th of August. Start the agenda, please, with declarations of interest. Would members please note that if they've had a business rate increase in excess of 10%, they will need to declare it and leave the chamber when we come to that item. Thank you. Do I have any declarations of interest, please? No, thank you. Item 2 on the agenda is minutes of the previous meeting. We're to confirm as a correct record the minutes of the meeting of the Council of the Isles of Scilly held on the 10th of July 2018. Your pages 126, sorry, and to 147. Sorry, minute numbers. Councillor Watt.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Page 8, C136/18, the minutes correctly recorded my interest in the planning application, but didn't record that I actually left the room, and probably more importantly, that I actually came back afterwards.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Page 11, I proposed an additional recommendation that the members' allowances scheme be reviewed later in the year. That wasn't actually added to the resolution, I believe, further down. Yes, but it's not in here. As an action.
Thank you. Are there any other items to do with the minutes, please? Could I have a proposer? Sorry, you, Councillor Mumford.
I would like to propose, please.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please? Seconded. Councillor Guy. Thank you. All those in favour? Any against? Thank you. That's carried. Chairman's announcements. I just want to welcome those who've joined us this evening, especially from the mainland. So welcome to you all. I should have done that at the beginning of the meeting, but welcome. Thank you. And I would just like to say that whilst a good effort is being made with regards to our water supply situation, I just want members to remain absolutely vigilant, please, in every respect, and make sure that people are on the ball with this and we don't take our foot off the pedal with regard to our visitors and businesses and so on. So please keep up the effort. Thank you. Item 4 on the agenda is questions under Standing Order 14. I have none. Item 5 on the agenda is to consider reports from committees, including receipt of minutes and or draft minutes for information. Your pages 15 to 40. So first of all, could we have anything from the Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Authority? Councillor Guy.
Secondly, I would like to bring members' attention that we now have Ruby Pender, who is our scientific integrated officer, and Tom Cooper, who is our Chief Fisheries Officer. They both informed me that they would like to do a members' briefing in the coming month to update members on different matters, which I think is a very good thing to happen. So, just to alert members that next month there will be a time when they will do a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Children's Trust Board, please. Councillor Williams, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the minutes reflect the meeting we had. I'm happy to take any questions if members wish to raise any concerns, queries or challenges on them.
Thank you. Also, Councillor Williams, the Health and Wellbeing Board, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The meeting, again, the minutes reflect the content of a discussion. We were experienced some IT issues at the meeting which affected the quality of the discussion with mainland partners, but again, happy to take any queries or questions on the minutes.
Thank you very much. Item 6 is to consider motions in accordance with Standing Order 12. We have none. Item 7 is members' updates. We do not have any written updates, but do we have any others, please? First of all, from lead members. No. Committee members? Committee chair? No. Sorry. Councillor Grottick.
Thank you, Chairman. I've attended in July 2 meetings on behalf of the Council, the Leadership Board and also the Local Enterprise Partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any member updates, please? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. In July, I attended the National Association of AONB conference in Kent. Wasn't able to attend the full one. Our representative, Johan Hicks, did attend for the full 3 days. It was a very useful conference, very useful contacts made between ourselves and other AONBs around the country. And we will produce a report to Council in due course about it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Item 8 is urgent items. Do we have any urgent?
No items for me.
Chairman.
Councillor Marcus.
Would you accept an urgent item on as an update on the water situation, please?
Certainly. Could I ask Senior Manager Craig Dryden, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So you'll see before you, we've done an update for Councillor Steve Sims as the lead member of place. As some of you will be aware, as he walks through the door, that he has actually just been doing an interview live on BBC Spotlight, because we have had quite a lot of national coverage this week. So I'm not going to read out the whole script, but just to confuse, I will quickly turn over, and I will actually start with some of the operational issues that the water team have been doing, because they have been working tirelessly to actually improve the effectiveness and efficiency of our water systems, and that includes sorting out some leaks. We've had one problematic one in the Longstone area, but as importantly, they've also been managing the use of the boreholes to allow some recovery. So that's been going really well. So to allow them to replenish as much as they possibly can, given the kind of difficult circumstances with obviously the lack of the rainfall, and also looking to increase the capacity and effectiveness as well of the desalination plant. More than that, what we've also been doing is working very closely in partnership and collaboration with South West Water. So their operations team has provided us with additional resilience, including the installation of monitoring equipment on St Mary's, so that we have a better understanding in terms of what the situation is of our wells. Likewise, we'll be doing similar on Briar as well. What they've also been doing as well is that they've provided a backup generator to St Mary's. So in the event that we do get any power outage, we actually have now a generator up at the desalination plant. And that's really important because of the continuity of supply. More than that, next week, there's a fairly big team coming over, not only to actually ensure that the generator, rather than actually using external fuel, actually is also plugged in actually to the desalination plant. So in the event of any outage, it will kick in automatically. So that's even more resilient. But also as well, they're actually increasing the electric cable as well. So we can actually use the desalination plant to its, hopefully to near its maximum capacity. So again, that will increase the amount of water that we're producing from the desalination plant. And of course, that's really important because it takes less pressure actually off the groundwater sources and our wells, which of course is really the biggest problem on St Mary's. Okay, so there's a lot of things going on operationally with good support from South West Water. South West Water also are providing us with a selection of water-saving devices as well. So as soon as they come, we'll be dishing those out free to households as well. And that will include things like timers for your showers. It will include things to put on your taps and showers, so it reduces the flow. And of course, we are still promoting people to actually use our toilet bags for the cisterns, or even putting a brick or a stone, just so you're actually reducing the flow. Back over the page, you'll see that we're doing a lot of campaigning, and virtually everyone now, certainly on St Mary, should have received a leaflet. I think there might be some small pockets of people that haven't had them. So I think, you know, we've been using staff, and I think you as members as well have been campaigning and distributing those leaflets. So that's been really good. And the good news is that actually usage has probably dropped by around 6% in 1 week. We can't be complacent, as the chairman's already said, and I think we still need to be very vigilant, and we still need to campaign. And particularly, I think that, you know, we need to focus on our visitor population as well to make sure that they're fully aware, because clearly our visitors are new to the islands, and so it's really important that we work very closely with all businesses in the island partnership to get that message through. And we've had really good support as well from local businesses, including the steamship company as well, because they're actually putting notices actually also on the Wesleyan and in the airport, so that's really good. Again, we've worked really closely with our staff to ensure that, you know, they are saving water, and that's kind of much wider across the board as well, because we have been giving tips to obviously all the residents as well in terms of how you can reduce water. And I think all people have come up with their own initiatives as well. I think the latest one, I think, is the Navy shower, which I think 1 or 2 members have been practicing. So that's really good. Again, just looking at operationally, so at the airport and also for the local fire and rescue service, we've now ceased doing all wet drills. And in fact, we did a really good exercise last Tuesday with the fire and rescue service, because if the power station, for any reason, is required to generate power, it requires somewhere in the region of 70,000 litres per day just to cool the generators. So what we've worked out is that we can actually use the fire service to actually run hoses to the sea to actually cool the generators. So we have been looking at quite a few contingency plans as well. And in fact, also Western Power have been really good as well, because they've stopped doing some of their servicing and testing to interrupt supplies as well, to make sure that we have got continuity of supply for the desalination plant, and also so they're not doing any kind of work to generate the power station unless absolutely required, because of the water situation. And in fact, we've had a number of businesses as well that have, I think, postponed and rescheduled work where there's heavy water usage. So that's been really good. So, I mean, that's effectively what we've been doing. Appreciate there's a little bit more in there, but I think members can read that at their own convenience. But as I say, obviously, clearly the situation is critical, and we're doing everything we possibly can to reduce consumption so we can save as much water as possible.
Thank you very much. Councillor Guy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask Craig, as water is such a premium at the moment, are we interested in private wells or not?
The issue is in terms of private wells, it's really difficult, because the hydrology situation on the islands, I think, is actually quite difficult to get a grasp of, because I think the way the geology is. So as far as we're concerned at the moment, private well usage isn't necessarily robbing some of our wells. But of course, we've got to be really careful as well, because we can't just tap into other people's wells as well, because of the water quality issue and also the distribution issues. So I think it actually is quite a complex area.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Could you just clarify if the generator is a temporary or is that a permanent installation?
Chairman, that's a really good question. We do need, I think the generator will be a permanent solution. We certainly need a permanent solution. And, the very fact now that it's actually going to be wired into the desalination plant is obviously to me suggests that it will actually be permanent. But I do need to just clarify that with South West Water, because they provided it. But my view is that, I think it's here to stay. But with a caveat, I need to clarify.
Thank you. Councillor Barclay.
Thank you, Chairman. I wonder if I could just have clarification on what is a Navy shower. I don't know.
Chairman, I don't think I'm best placed to actually say that, but I know certainly one of our councillors has been on television explaining what a Navy shower is.
Yes. It was on Spotlight tonight. I'll explain what a Navy shower is. You get into the shower, you turn the water on to wet yourself. Then you turn the shower off and you soap yourself. Then you turn the shower on and rinse and be out of the shower within about 1.5 minutes.
Right. I'd just like to thank you very much for that. To mention how well drier people have done in restricting their water usage, and I would like to thank them very much.
Yeah, can I also thank as well, obviously, the water team as well, because they've been working again tirelessly on Briar. And in fact, yesterday they did some work to the well to actually improve the rate it replenishes, so it replenishes more rapidly now. So all the time we're actually looking both at operations on Briar as well as St Mary's.
Perhaps the time will come when Silly will need one of those dogs featured on Country File this week, which actually tracks water leakage underground. They were spaniels that, really could successfully locate an area which was leaking underground. And the other thing is, I think, too, if this happens another year, when the school is still working, we ought to run a competition for the best slogan from children. Because I remember many years ago, we had Women's Hour programme here at the time of a water shortage, and there were several good slogans, one of which I remember and constantly repeat to myself was 4 Ps to a pull.
Thank you. Councillor Molson.
Yeah, thanks for that, Craig, and all the efforts of your department and the guys and girls that are working there. There's one thing that I would like to raise is that I am very aware, and I think all the other members are, that to run the desal plant at max output is exceptionally expensive. We obviously will need to make financial provision for that in the near future. Can you update us on that as soon as you can?
Yeah, no problem, Chairman. I can do that.
Thank you. Councillor Sims.
First, thank you, Craig. I don't have to do a water update now, which is excellent. I just wanted to say that there seems to be a very good awareness and take-up with visitors. I mentioned one specific instance, the play last week. Nobody flushed the toilet all night, which is actually, it's not particularly pleasant, but it certainly does the trick. And if visitors are doing that all round, that's saving an awful lot of water.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Good to read the report and real step up of operations to reduce water usage all across the board. Just a question whether we should actually be considering setting targets of water reduction now, usage.
Yeah, Chairman, we have considered that. The difficulty we have at the moment is obviously the population is fluctuating in terms of visitor numbers. We're assuming we're at peak now in terms of the islands because obviously we are in the school holidays. And I think at the end of the day, even if we have aspirational targets, the most important thing is actually what the consumption is on a daily basis and on a weekly basis. So whatever the targets are, if we're not meeting those targets, then it's not really achieving anything, if that kind of makes sense. I hear what you're saying. It'd be great if we could have a 6% improvement week on week. But I think, again, that might be quite difficult to achieve.
Well, I suppose to ask the question in a different way, where do we stand on usage? I mean, essentially, what are the reserves looking like?
Chairman, again, that's kind of the $1 million question, because if I'm being honest, we really don't know. Because of the complexity of the hydrology in the aquifers, nobody actually knows what the overall capacity is. And one of our difficulties, of course, is unlike the mainland, we don't have large reservoirs, which are quite easy to monitor. You can actually look at the levels. Although we have water tanks that we call reservoirs, technically they are, large storage tanks, but not in the traditional sense of a reservoir as you would expect on the mainland.
Thank you. I now come on to item 9, which is the first of the planning applications. I'll hand over to our senior officer, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for planning permission for a partial revision to the redevelopment works as approved in 2016. The report sets out or seeks to explain the elements which have already been implemented, those which the applicant still wishes to implement and can lawfully do so, and those elements which are no longer able to implement as part of the originally granted permission, as well as those newly proposed elements. So for clarification, and I'll run through the slides in a minute, already implemented is the conversion of starboard light and port light to self-catering accommodation, the conversion of Gibson and Hendra to self-catering accommodation, the conversion of a single-storey block of hotel rooms to staff accommodation. Still to be implemented is that they've got permission to do already, is the conversion of the two-storey northern staff block to self-catering suites, including upgrading of this building, but not the installation of the pitched roof as was previously amended when the phasing plan was agreed in 2016. The revised entrance to the hotel from Garrison Hill, the green roof over the flat roof to the hotel lounge, the pitched roof to the west end of the dining room, the construction of units 1 to 3 adjacent to port light and starboard light, and the installation of a solar array. What is now proposed is the construction of a pair of self-catering cottages within the garden, the introduction of 2 balcony areas above existing flat roofs, the alteration of windows in the hotel lounge, the alteration of windows to doors in the main hotel to facilitate access to the balconies, to form that's as part of the self-catering conversion of the hotel rooms from self-catering to form self-catering suites, the construction of a pedestrian gate in the boundary of the wall of the hotel on Garrison Hill, and the construction of a gate along the vehicular drive adjacent to the sea wall. And what they're offering to rescind, what they've already got permission to do, is the construction of the pitched roof above the block to the rear, the construction of 3 new self-catering cottages, which were originally planned to front onto the Mermaid car park. And that's it. So the application was submitted with an application for advertisement consent, which introduced new signage, illumination for the new and the existing signage, and the repositioned flagpole. The advertisement consent has been withdrawn, so these elements are not under consideration. You will note from the officer's report we have considered the proposal and taken account of concerns raised by Historic England. So whilst these raise concerns about the impact of things like the balconies and the new pedestrian gate, they did not raise an objection to the proposal. Officers have weighed the positive improvements of the scheme overall and have concluded that the potential harm identified by Historic England is outweighed by the benefits of the proposal. The applicant has addressed concerns raised by representations in relation to light pollution and has agreed to remove all proposed external lighting. An objection to the scheme was made by the Environment Agency on the basis of increased risk of damage from sea ingress and overtopping of waves, particularly to the proposed sea garden cottages. A flood risk assessment has been submitted to address these issues, and protection and mitigation now forms part of the application, and that was the basis of the addendum report circulated last week. On this basis, the Environment Agency have removed its objection from the proposal. A late consultation response has been received from Cornwall Archaeological Unit, which raises concerns that the heritage assessment has not been updated since it was produced to support the 2016 application. It's also noted that they agree with the conclusions of the archaeological desk-based assessment submitted with the application, that there is a high potential for buried post-medieval archaeology, and any remains discovered during the course of construction works would be of national significance. They would request that this report is updated and reconsultation is undertaken before a decision is made. For information, this response was received after the 7th of August original consultation period, which ended on the 29th of May, and after the 14-day reconsultation, which ended on the 1st of August. In response to this late consultation response, officers would note that a full archaeological monitoring condition is recommended. The wording was agreed with Cornwall Archaeological Unit, as this was different to the wording suggested by the applicants. And it's considered that this would address the archaeological concerns raised and enable any archaeological remains uncovered as part of the development to be formally recorded. It's considered that overall the additional elements of the proposed development, together with the rescinding of the previously approved aspects of the redevelopment, are on balance acceptable. Subject to conditions set out and the formally signing of a unilateral undertaking, which is a legal agreement to not implement those rescinded elements, the application is recommended for approval. And I'm just going to run through some slides before you have any questions, if that's okay. This is the site. This is the current layout of the application. This shows the phasing plan that was agreed in, not very clearly, in 2016. So these red areas are still to be implemented. So does that make sense? This is the Garrison Hill at the bottom. That's the flat roof of the current lobby. They're the three new self-catering cottages, and that's the roof over the west end of the dining room. That's the pitched roof. So they are still to be implemented. This L-shaped block at the back, port light and starboard light, and Gibson and Hendry have already been implemented, and they intend to retain the conversion of that former staff block to self-catering, but not put the pitched roof on it. This has been rescinded, the redevelopment of the garden in terms of the landscaping that was originally proposed, and that 3 cottages has also been rescinded. It's not very clear, is it? This is the proposed lower ground level plan. So it shows the lower ground floor of the 2 cottage gardens in the garden there. Some internal alterations to the Toulouse hotel bedrooms, but that forms a new lower ground space for guests. The proposed row level plan shows the next floor up, which you can't really see on this plan. Not very clear, is it? The next level up shows the fronting the Mermaid car park, the balcony, and the roof of the L-shaped new cottage gardens in the garden. Plus the, no, it's not. The next level up shows the, this shows the new access from Garrison Hill at the bottom of the screen that will facilitate access to this lower block, which will become 4 self-catering suites. It also shows on the other side the 4 balconies that will be created on the flat roof there. And that's the roof plan, showing the removal of the flue in the center of the picture and the making up of the gable. Some photos from the front, from the quay. Above the flat roof, as you go down Garrison Hill, the main entrance. This is from within the drive, so that's looking out towards Rat Island and 2 garages. That's the existing staff block, which will be subject to change of use and an upgrade in its appearance. And that's the drive. There's a pair of gates on the Garrison wall sticks out there, a pair of gates on that side. So this is the elevations as existing. This shows key elevations, which aren't very clear, but hopefully you've already looked at these on the plans. I'm going to run through them because they're not clear at all. This is a plan of what's already been approved in 2016 to show what did have consent. So the 6 self-catering cottages facing the Mermaid car park. So that will be retained. That will be rescinded. The one on the far right will be upgraded, but the roof won't be put on. That's been rescinded. Again, another elevation to be implemented, rescinded, and implemented, rescinded. And that's just some information on the number of self-catering bedrooms. That the cumulative total will be 11, with hotel bedrooms being 29. Staff accommodation, 2 1-bed staff accommodation units on site, and staff accommodation off-site will be 22 rooms with an existing property they've got, and they've got an application in for the wall pack battery. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Councillor Guy.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I've been a planner for 5 years, and this is a very complex application from the previous one in my book. Could I ask the planning officer to repeat all that again, please? No, joking aside, I would like to see a site visit and adjourn this one until we've got our heads around it. There's a lot more involved than on the previous application.
Just to say, we did have a member site visit last week.
I apologise I didn't attend.
Councillor Mumford.
Yes, I would like to see the applicants explain how they're going to do disabled access. Because looking at this plan I have in front of me, all the accesses seem to have steps.
Yeah,
Is there
that
any
is correct.
provision for wheelchairs or disabled access?
So what they've confirmed that the development will be for ambulant disabled only. It has no additional wheelchair access over and above the existing hotel accessibility. The cottage garden, pair of semi-detached cottages in the garden will have will have ground floor bedrooms that will enable people in wheelchairs to rent that accommodation.
Is it not, are hotels not now required to have disabled access unless they're a listed building?
Is that? Well, I mean, it's not a listed building, but do you know the answer to that?
Chairman, we have actually sought advice from building control to see in terms of whether Part M of the building regulations applies to hotels. I think one of the issues, I think, for this application is that obviously we're looking at a hotel that exists at the moment. So things like retrofitting are going to be, potentially more difficult. But obviously the new elements, we can actually require or certainly request more disabled access. But obviously we can't sort out the entire hotel because it's already existing, if that makes sense. Because that would be effectively retrofitting. But obviously the other elements that require both planning permission and building regulations will need to comply with the requirements for disabled access.
Councillor Grottick.
Thank you, Chairman. 2 points. I'm very pleased to see that the semi-detached dwellings are for restricted holiday lettings, and I'd just like to confirm that they're going to be linked to the main hotel ownership and they won't be allowed to be sold separately. And secondly, there are several mature trees between the hotel and Garrison Lane. Is it a condition that the applicant would actually require permission? Obviously, one expects that some form of tree surgery is probably necessary, but I wouldn't like to think that we would lose any of these mature trees.
So the applicant, we have conditioned the accommodation to be tied to the hotel. That would be a condition of the permission if granted. The applicant has confirmed that it's not their intention to take out the trees at the top of Garrison Hill. They are aware of their requirement to notify us of any works to those trees should it be required, and they do recognise that the trees will need crown lifting and crown thinning, which they will put in an application for notification before they do those works.
Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Regarding the sustainable design measures, further to discussion with Lisa Walton by email, just like to request that the rainwater harvesting actually is incorporated into the flushing of toilets somewhere in the building, or some useful use of rainwater. It's a significant area of roof that can catch rainwater, and I think certainly in light of measures in terms of our diminishing water supplies, that actually this should be the standard that all new buildings should adhere to, really.
Yeah, just to come back on that, condition 15 does require sustainable design measures, and that information, when it comes to us, we can agree. We'll have to consult with water colleagues, and if it eases concerns about it, we can do that in consultation with the lead member for planning and the lead member for place, as well as the senior manager, before we discharge that condition, to make sure we get the best water saving measures, and they don't just put in a token rainwater harvesting bin on one downpipe.
Thank you. Well, we have a recommendation that, subject to the completion of a planning obligation to prevent the further implementation of planning permissions P16055/FUL and P16113/ROV, and the negation of any claim for compensation, that members approve the application for the reasons set out and subject to the conditions in Appendix A. Sorry? Yeah. So have we got that? Do you mind reading it out? Thank you, Matt.
Here we go. So there was an addendum that came out for this item, and the recommendation has changed slightly to take account of the additional condition in the addendum. And so the last bit of the recommendation should read, for the reasons set out and subject to the conditions in Appendix A to the original report and as set out in the addendum to that report. So that we capture those additional conditions as well. So if we can take that as the...
All those in favour? Any against? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, there's one abstention. Thank you. Item 10 on the agenda, St Mary's Fire Station.
Thank you, Chair. This is one of 3 applications to install solar panels at various sites around St Mary's as part of the wider Smart Island programme to generate renewable energy, creating a more sustainable community and assisting in reducing fuel poverty. The panels are the same specification as already installed on council homes around the islands. These are black and have a low reflective finish. The installation of solar panels has so far focused on council-owned land and buildings with a large proportion of installations not requiring permission. This includes the installation of solar on roofs on council houses on Sallypot and at Old Town. This application is for the installation of the same panels on the roof of the fire station building on Porthmelon Industrial Estate, located on the industrial estate. It is not considered that the panels proposed will be particularly visible from public vantage points. And this, together with their as being a low reflective product, are not considered to give rise to any wider harm. And on this basis, subject to the conditions set out, the application is recommended for approval.
Councillor Guy.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to ask the planning officer, is this not a retrospective planning application as the work has already been done?
Yes, it is now, yes. It wasn't at the time.
Councillor Molson.
Just like to propose.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, just like to express my support for this project and as part of the Smart Islands programme, so I'd like to second the proposal.
Councillor Sims.
Just a little bit of clarification. Lisa, you just said that they're not particularly visible. Well, there's loads of solar panels over here that are visible, and I don't necessarily think they're an issue. I mean, I would just be reluctant to sort of start going down a path where people perhaps think they're an eyesore and giving them excuses to make them think they're an eyesore, because they're very much not.
Thank you. Councillor Molson.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. So we have a proposer and a seconder for approval. All those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Thank you. Item 11 is St Mary's Airport.
Thank you, Chair. This is the second application for solar panel installation. In this case, it's proposed to install a solar garden on land at St Mary's Airport. The solar panels will be situated on land to the west side of the airport approach road and to the west of the existing car park. This land slopes down in a northwesterly direction, and to the west and northwest of the site is enclosed by field boundary hedges. The application site to the north and adjacent to is the existing weather monitoring station at the airport. The site of the solar garden will clearly be very visible from the airport itself, particularly on the approach road or on footpaths running up from Enna Close. There will be views of the site from Old Town Bay, Penninnis Head and along King Edward's Road. There will also be views from Church Road, and more distantly the site will also be visible from the garrison. The Civil Aviation Authority have been consulted and have no objections to the proposed installation, and as such there is no concern from the airport from an operational perspective. The AONB partnership have also been consulted, and whilst supportive of the proposal, did raise some concerns about the need to enclose the site with high fencing. This has been amended, and the solar garden will now be enclosed with a simple post and rail fence to match that which already encloses the airport. Having considered the visibility from the proposed site and the various vantage points around the island and the consultation responses, it is considered that due to the distances, the topography of the landscape, and together with the low reflective black panels proposed, the solar garden will not have a detrimental impact upon the wider landscape or the operation of the airport. Subject to the conditions set out, it is recommended for approval. Just run through some photos. So this is, again, you can't really see, site of the airport. This is a mock-up. These are the panels in height, the section. This is the site from the weather station. And this is obviously from zoomed in from looking back from Star Castle. You can't really see it, but it's obviously on the horizon line there. Again, from behind the houses on Sallyport. I need a pointer. Zoomed in. This is from the Garrison playing field. Again, you'd be hard pressed to actually see the airport in that photograph. Zoomed in from Old Town Bay. They slope, the land slopes down above the houses on the middle of the shop. And that is a view from the top of Pilot's Retreat, looking back, you see the airport in the centre. That's from King Edward's Road, looking back to the airport just to the right. And again, zoomed in. And that's it.
Thank you. Councillor Grottick.
I think Councillor Barclay put her light on first, Chairman.
Go ahead.
You sure? Well, I won't take long. It's just to say I've read the report, and apparently we have assessed the fact that there won't be any glare for pilots when they land or take off, but I would just like to be reassured that this will be monitored just in case what we think is not going to be a problem is one.
Thank you. Councillor Barclay.
Chairman, I'd like to propose approval. And I think my point of concern, which was the high fence, has obviously been removed. And I'd just like to know whether, in fact, retrospectively, if there was a problem with the visibility of these panels, whether there would be an opportunity for soft planting, which could mitigate that.
Lisa, can you...
Just thinking about that, I guess it's on the council's land. If we feel as an authority, we need to screen it without obviously compromising the ability to catch the sun with overshadowing, then I don't see why we couldn't as the land, the leaseholder of the site.
I don't imagine it would be necessary. I did think with the high fencing that was probably a bit damaging, but I think generally the solar panels will be in keeping with the airport infrastructure.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. I believe this is actually the second solar garden application that's ever come before this council. The previous one was in a very different site, very screened, whereas this is the complete opposite, very open. It's clearly a very important part of the Smart Islands programme. For that reason, I'm very sympathetic because of it. I'd just like to pick up on some detail there that Councillor Barclay alluded to, actually. In the design and accents statement for the application, 5.1.4 and 5.1.8 details the ecological enhancements. This is actually within the design access statement. I'd like to propose a new condition that gives more details about the planting of hedgerows and the wildflowers proposed inside the solar garden itself. In particular, I think these must seem to be appropriate to Scilly, that they will survive and thrive here. Establishment is assured, and that the site maintenance plan is in place as well. I can foresee a situation where there's planting going on which isn't maintained, and which actually isn't appropriate to Scilly as well. So I'd like to see more detail over that, please. And can I just confirm that the assurances again over that fencing, that has been reduced in height and materials?
Yeah, just to come back, the fencing they have amended the plans to show the lower height fencing, and we can, I think it would be reasonable if members have concerns about visual impact to put a landscaping condition on, which would give us the ability to assess those details of planting and planting schedules.
In that case, I would propose the application in addition to that additional condition, please, on landscaping.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you. I wanted to clarify whether the siting of the perimeter fence is going to still allow parking on that site. And
Chairman, I think that's one for me, and very interesting actually. We had a site meeting this morning, both myself and the airport manager, because clearly in the future car parking could be a revenue earner once we've had our legal advice, the long-awaited legal advice, I hasten to add. So it will actually include a strip, so we can still allow parking actually on the grass. But what it does give us is a good opportunity to actually do much better than it is at the moment, because it's a bit of a free-for-all. And also we have had concerns, certainly in the winter months, where the land starts dropping away quite rapidly. We've had cars parked there where there's a lot of surface water runoff, particularly in the winter time, and that slope gets quite slippery, and we have had some concerns about parking actually on that area. So it does give us an opportunity, as I say, to actually control the area much better.
Thank you. Councillor Legg.
I would actually suggest that we should be proud of any solar panels. Going back to Councillor Sims's comments from the last application, I have no issue with solar panels at all. I think when people arrive at the airport, one of the first things that they see is solar panels soaking up our incredible sunshine, which is much cleaner due to the lack of dust in the air than it is on the mainland. I think it's a positive for the islands, and we shouldn't be screening it.
Thank you. Councillor Sims.
I'd like to second the proposal along with Jonathan's amendment that we don't plant plants that will probably die.
Thank you. So we have a proposal that members approve the application for the reasons set out in the report and subject to the conditions set out in the appendix, including, I understand, the extra condition for planting and maintenance. And we have a seconder for that. All those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Thank you. That's carried. Item 12 on the agenda is also St Mary's Airport.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the third application to install solar panels as part of the Smart Island programme. The application includes the installation of panels on the airport terminal building. Panels are the same spec as already installed on council homes around the islands. As with the previous application for a solar garden, both the CAA and the AONB partnership have been consulted and no objections have been raised. This is in relation to both the visual impact as well as operational considerations. Being located on the existing building, which is in a particularly elevated position and therefore widely visible across St Mary's, the panels have the potential to be visible from all around St Mary's. Having considered distances at which the airport is visible, the positions of the panels and the low reflective nature, it's not considered that there will be wider visual harm to the scenic beauty of the AONB, and it is considered they would have a neutral impact on the conservation area. And subject to the conditions set out, is recommended for approval.
Councillor Sims.
First of all, I'd happily propose the recommendation, but I have a question. With the solar panels that are going on the residential homes, then the immediate beneficiary is the occupants of that home. They get the 8.5p per kilowatt. Does the council get cheaper electricity up the airport, or is it going into the common pool? It's just a query, really. Because it's 60 kilowatts at the airport.
It's not really a planning consideration, to be frank. The aim of the Smart Islands program is to socialize the value across all residents of the Isles of Scilly. So therefore, the benefits and the value will eventually be shared across the island and all residents.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus.
Second the proposal.
Thank you. So we have a proposer and a seconder that members approve the application for the reasons set out in the report and subject to the conditions set out in the appendix. All those in favour? Any against? It's carried. Thank you. Item 13 on the agenda is number 2 Matthews Field.
I need to declare, I was unfortunately missed the most exciting part of the meeting and I was unable to declare an interest on this because I wasn't here, but I'm declaring an interest on this agenda item now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is a resubmitted application for a first floor extension to this existing semi-detached property following a refusal of an earlier scheme at full council in June 2018. This previous scheme was refused for 2 reasons, which are set out in the report. As you will note, this current revised design has addressed one of the 2 reasons for refusal, but on the basis of the bulky and unusual design, it is not considered that the revised application addresses the first reason for refusal. On this basis, the current scheme is also recommended for refusal on the grounds of poor and bulky design in a particularly prominent location. Members are advised to note that the submission of a potential revision to the current scheme has been submitted. As this amended plan was submitted after the full council report was published, and the fact that officers have not had sufficient time or a full set of plans to consider the revised scheme, the recommendation to refuse stands on the basis of the plans as originally submitted. Members can either refuse the current application as recommended, and the applicants can resubmit a new application for a further amended scheme, or members can vote to defer the current application, allowing further time to submit a full set of amended plans, which will allow officers time to fully consider this revised scheme. Officers would like any deferment to be on the basis that the applicants agree to an extension of time on the current application. Should they not agree to this extension, then officers would advise that the current scheme should be refused as recommended.
Thanks.
Run through the slides. So this is the outline of the resubmitted scheme. Oh, sorry, that's as refused. That's as amended. It's a view from Luemba back to the back of 2 Matthews Field and the CAD wall and adjoining it. That's the existing site plan. That's 2 Matthews Field. So this is existing and proposed front elevations with the 2 windows as existing. The proposed rear elevations that the report is based on, existing and proposed. The existing and proposed side elevations that this report is based on, and the existing ground floor, proposed ground floor, and existing first floor and proposed first floor. So this is as originally submitted earlier this year. This is the extension. This is how it was amended and then subsequently refused. This is how this current application was originally submitted. This is how it was amended and what this current recommendation is based on. This is an indication of what they have offered to amend it. So from the side and from the rear, and that's a further iteration with the pulling it in on one side as well. So it's not we've not had a full set of amended plans, so the report is based on this scheme.
Thank you. Councillor Guy.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'll propose we defer this application so we can look at the revised plans and hopefully get a better understanding of the drawings, if that's possible.
Councillor Molson.
I'll second that deferral so it gives time for officers to make due consideration of the recently amended plans.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus. Okay, Councillor Grottick.
If I could just clarify that that will mean that the applicant would agree that although we would be technically out of time, then we could carry on with this as one application, which I would imagine might save him some planning fees, which obviously would be fair. Is that correct?
Yeah, just to come back. So if we requests an extension of time to deal with this application and the amended scheme, that there will be no further fees incurred by the applicant.
Thank you. So we have a proposer and a seconder for deferral of this item. All those in favour? Any against? That's carried. Thank you. Right, item number 14 on the agenda is the update on the local plan preparation timetable, also in the hands of our senior officer for planning. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Chair. This is a report to update members on the current progress and timescales for progressing the adoption of a new local plan, as well as agree the adoption of the revised timetable. One amendment just to update you on is that reference on page 134, paragraph 8, to the 2012 National Planning Policy Framework not yet being adopted. Since this report was written, the National Planning Policy Framework, the NPPF, has been adopted, so the issues set out and any other implications will be addressed as part of the amendments to the draft plan going forward. Also, since this report was written, officers have also met locally with the Isles of Scilly Wildlife Trust to go through their concerns in relation to the draft plan. This report notes some general slippage due to dealing with planning applications following the ending of arrangements with Exmoor National Park, diverting resources away from working on the local plan. Officers have continued to address the consultation responses following the 7-week public consultation earlier this year, which will be published shortly. We are now looking to report back to members in October with the finalised draft plan, with a view to carrying out further final public consultation ahead of submission to the Secretary of State later in the year. Work remains within budget, and this year's budget has been set to ensure we can move forward on the submission and the examination of the local plan.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus.
Yeah, I'd like to propose the recommendation and just reiterate the hard work that's going on by the planning team to ensure that all the representations are being looked at and studied. As members are aware, we've had one local plan working group, and we are planning to have another one fairly soon to go through the rest of the amendments, and hopefully we'll get the plan out to local consultation again as soon as we can.
Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Thank you. My understanding is that the schedule could change subject to any large planning applications that come in between now and next year. Are there opportunities to go back to Exmoor National Park on a short-term arrangement to try to reduce the likelihood of slippage if that were to occur?
It is an arrangement that both the Council of the Isles of Scilly, the Planning Authority, and Exmoor National Park are both keen to keep those connections, and they have a new head of planning starting at the end of August, and it's subject to their own workloads, that person taking up the post being able to take on work. But they have expressed that willingness to do that should the need arise, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Sims.
I'd like to second the recommendation, and I just wanted to make a point, really, because it's come up on Facebook today and I get people asking me, but essentially, why the hell are you not want to build more houses when there's not enough water? Well, essentially, I just wanted to reiterate the point that the local plan is contingent on there being adequate infrastructure in place. I don't know if anybody's listening out there, but that's the whole point of the local plan.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to reiterate the points that Councillor Marcus made around the hard work going on around the local plan. I might note from the report, paragraph 6, in terms of the slippage, and essentially, you know, we as a council have shot ourselves in the foot somewhat in terms of the difficulties with IT and finance, which has set back the local plan. Just like to ask a question on paragraph 15 around the costs involved. I was surprised to read that the fees to the planning inspector are of around £1,000 a day, and just wondering if that is all written within the current budget, and whether we're experiencing or expected to experience any sort of budget overspend on this process.
Yeah, so we have set the budget or carried forward the budget from last year through to this year, because obviously we've not submitted to the Secretary of State. We have sought to gauge the cost of the process of the examination and the submission from similar sized authorities, and got a ballpark figure from the planning inspectorate themselves. That fee is not something we can negotiate on. That is just the cost of their time. And we have set a budget based on a good estimation of the likely time it's going to take. And
But it is possible that it could go over or indeed under budget.
yeah, so if the examination is longer than we would expect for a district of this size, or becomes more complicated.
Chairman, the point I would make is, and one of the reasons for the slippage is we want the right plan, and it's all about the quality of the local plan to make sure that it is absolutely sound. So it's really important that we look at every single representation, and where possible, we actually make sure that we address that representation where it's actually reasonable and feasible to do so. And at the end of the day, the better the quality of the plan, actually, the less the planning inspectorate will be involved, because one of the consequences is you should have actually a shorter examination in public. So it's really important that we do spend quality time making sure that the contents of the local plan are as good as they can. And obviously the one thing we will have to do now, because the National Planning Policy Framework has now changed, it has been adopted, make sure that actually some of the changes we're making also correspond to the new changes in the National Planning Policy Framework.
Thank you. So we have a recommendation that members agree to adopt the revised local plan preparation timetable as the up-to-date timetable for the local plan preparation. And we have a proposer and a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Thank you, that's carried. Item 15 even on our agenda is our external audit plan, and that's in the hands of Andrew Davis. Thank you, from Grant Thornton. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Before I get into the 2017-18 external audit plan, I'd just like to give members a bit of context as to to where we are and where that sits within the grand scheme of things. Back in 2015-16, off the back of the external audit, we identified a number of issues, which resulted in the general fund reserves going down to about half £500,000. We also issued Section 24 recommendations, which are public recommendations, which the council had to respond to. These were around addressing the level of reserves, introducing cash flow forecast monitoring going forward, budgetary control and financial reporting, revisiting the assumptions that underpin the medium-term financial strategy, and review of capacity and capability. So they were the Section 24 recommendations. At the end of the 2016-17 audit, we reported to members that actually, and pleasingly reported, that action had been taken against all of those recommendations. So, but whilst action's been taken against those Section 24 recommendations remain in place, just because some of them, because of the issues that were faced, it's going to take time to embed. So whilst progress has been made against all of those, there's a period of time where actually, because of the issues that were faced, that there's going to be a period of time to embed those. So just in summary, that obviously there's actually so in terms of how that fits into the 2017-18 audit plan, we do a section on value for money conclusion, where we will obviously revisit these points, and I'll come on to that when I get onto the 2017-18 audit plan. But progress has been made, but work is still to be done. That's the sort of the key message. In terms of the external audit plan, can I take you through to page 155, which is where we start to set out what the significant risks are that we've identified as part of our planning. Now, I'm not going to go through each of these risks because a lot of them are the same as they were in the previous year. But what I would like to draw members' attentions to are the ones sort of around revenue recognition. This is something where we found errors in previous years. For the past 2 years, we found issues around revenue being recognised incorrectly. And that was part of the issue in 2015-16, which led the reserves to be brought down. We found issues again with that in 2016-17 and reported a material weakness in the way that grants were recognised and controlled. So that is going to be a key area of our work going into 2017-18, where we'll be focusing a lot of our resources. The other significant risk that I'd like to bring your attention to is on page 158, and that is to do with the introduction of the new financial system. Obviously, when you introduce a new financial system, there's a risk that the data might not be transferred correctly, and hence we could have a material misstatement within the accounts. So that is an area where we'll be focusing a lot of work. Since drafting this audit plan, we've actually done the majority of that work now. So we've looked at the transfer from Sage through to the ERP system, and at a global level, we're happy that all the figures have gone across correctly. We've still got a little bit of work to do around at a transactional level to make sure that they've all been correctly mapped. But in terms of the global picture, we're happy that they've all gone across correctly. We've also done a high-level IT review, and we found no significant issues in terms of that. And off the back of this work as well, we've also looked at the draft financial statements and have agreed those through to ERP, through to the trial balance. So we've got the assurance that actually what's in the system is what's ended up in the financial statements. So that's just some early work that we've done ahead on that sort of big ticket item to make sure that there weren't any significant issues coming out of that. The other risk that's reported on that page is around going concern. Now, this is something that previously wouldn't have been set out as a significant risk. That's not. This isn't a reflection really on the Council of the Isles of Scilly. This is just to do with actually the prominence within the sector, the challenge that local government's facing as a whole. So it's something the work that we're doing on that will be the same work that we've done in previous years in terms of looking at sort of cash flow forecasts, can the bills be paid for the coming 12 months. Can I just take you through to page 161, which is where we set out materiality. Materiality as a concept is where this is, if we found an error above that, that is where we would be leading into sort of a qualified set of accounts, because we're saying that it distorts the view of the reader of the accounts. For the Council of the Isles of Scilly, that level is set at £233,000, so quite low, but it's a percentage of the expenditure of the council, and that percentage is 1.3% for anyone interested. In terms of what gets reported to you, that will be £11,000. So triviality is the level at which we report to council. So any error that we found, even if amended, that would be reported to you. Going on to value for money over the page. And this comes back to the section 24 recommendations that I was talking about at the beginning of this slot. And no surprisingly, the risks are around financial sustainability, financial governance and internal control, and around partnership working, which underpins the capacity side of things. So as part of our value for money work, we'll be looking to do that over the next 2 months, covering those risks off and be able to update members as part of our audit findings report about how they go forward and how that impacts on the section 24 recommendations that are in place. That's all I was going to say. If there's any questions.
Councillor Marcus.
Just on that last point, Chairman, the scrutiny committee, as you know, as you probably aren't aware, but we're doing a piece of work on the inter-authority agreement for publication in September. Is that right? So it might be worth external audit, keep an eye out for that and using that as a basis for some of your work. Or, okay, so thank you.
Do we have any more questions? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Just regarding the introduction of the new financial system, what is your view in terms of its effectiveness and any issues during the transfer from the old to the new system, please?
There weren't any issues in terms of the transfer. The only sort of comment I would make, and I mean Russell, Section 151 might want to add more to this, but in terms of that data transfer, it wasn't done as a kind of on an IT platform basis. So, but it was done in a way, sort of a more manual basis through the use of journals. But what I would say is that we've had our IT specialists look at that, and as part of re-performing that, the audit trail and the information that supported it was of a really high standard. It was a really well controlled process. In terms of ERP as a system, I'm probably not well placed to comment on it in terms of how the system itself works. But in terms of like where I've used it, where I've seen it in other clients, and it's something that's well suited to the public sector.
Yeah, not so much the question on the system itself, but the operation of a sound financial system. What I wanted your opinion on.
Yeah. But I mean, I've got no sort of issues in terms of ERP.
Thank you, Councillor Sims.
Thank you for your report. I just wanted to make the point, and you did say it fairly swiftly, that you haven't found any issues, but I just wanted to really thank Russell and the team, because there's a lot of blood, sweat and tears to get to that point. I think they did a considerable amount of work over the last 18 months to get there, and much relieved that they got there, really.
Councillor Grottick.
Thank you. Just picking up on what Councillor Sims has just said then, we can be cautiously optimistic reading this that we're beginning to improve across all areas of the Section 24 recommendations, but that you're still in the next 2 months doing some more detailed work and continuing to work on an analysis of the control environment and the risk issues.
Thank you.
Is that correct? Would you agree that? Yes? Mr. David? Yeah, obviously. Thank you.
Thank you. So the recommendation is that members consider the external audit plan for the year ending 31st of March 2018, raising any issues, questions or areas for clarification with the Council's external auditors as appropriate. I thank you very much for your report. Item 16 on the agenda is the
Chairman, I'll propose that recommendation.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Going ahead of myself. Could I have a seconder, Avril? Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Thank you. Now we'll move on to item 16, the local discretionary rate scheme, which is in the hands of our Section 151 officer. Thank you, Russell.
Thank you, Chair. I think all members are probably aware that there was a national revaluation of all rateable values on business premises in 2017. This had a varying impact nationally across premises changes, but was broadly financially neutral across the whole country. But there were individual properties both across the country and on the islands which had a significant impact, and within the economic climate we are in at the moment, some of those challenges are quite significant and quite challenging. Government actually realised this once it had approved the process, and it allocated an additional sum of some £300 million for a local discretionary rate relief fund that would be run over 4 years, starting in 2017 to 2018. And that was to try and help those businesses who have faced the steepest and the most challenging increases.
The Council of Isles of Scilly were allocated a share of that fund, and that's set out there in the report. It starts off in 2017-18 with £15,000 and goes down gradually to zero in 2021. We've now double checked with government, and there is no flexibility to move funding between the years. So part of coming up with a scheme means that we need to allocate those sums to a scheme that gives that level of spend each year, so on a declining basis. So we can't put it all into year one, for instance, or spread it more evenly over the 3 or 4 years. We have to live within the profile that the government have given us. To actually trigger the first payment, 2017-18, which obviously is in arrears, we must make a decision before the 30th of September this year. So hence why we're bringing the policy today. In arriving at the policy, we defined a number of key principles. First was we would concentrate on those businesses who had an increase of 10% or more, that the scheme must be affordable within the existing allocation, and it must reduce in line with the government funding, so we don't put any unnecessary pressure on the council's budget going forward. Based on the key principles, 3 options have been identified. Basically, these 3 options work along the lower the threshold, the more businesses that we can assist, but obviously the lower that support will be. So if you start off with option 1, we're talking of all those businesses with an increase of 10% or more, which is about 158 businesses in the islands. We would award a series of reductions as set out there, starting at 11.77% in 2017-18, going down to 0 at the end of 4 years. Option 2 looks at increasing that threshold to 15%, so it then hits a smaller number of businesses, some 105, but allows a moderate increase in the support that can be given, up to 13.55% in the first year. And finally, in option 3, we increase the threshold to 20%. That reduces the businesses impacted to 68, but they get 15.5% reduction in the first year, which again gradually reduces over the next 4 years. So we have 3 proposals that we've put together as 3 options. I'm asking members really for their proposal, which one they want to be adopted. The idea is that if we can get this adopted today, we can action this and get the reductions and the bills out so that the businesses have the reduction on their liability going forward. Thank you. Councillor Grottick.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't want to stifle debate, but my personal view would be that we should help more businesses, and 10% is quite an increase. I mean, business rates are a significant proportion of any businesses' issues, I would think. So I would favour and propose that we adopt option 1, but obviously I don't want to stifle debate. I'm happy to wait until we've had round the table comment first, but that's my intention, to propose option 1.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus.
I really struggled with this paper because the amounts being offered are so measly compared to the increases. It doesn't really matter which one we choose. I think it's kind of, was it disrespectful from government to even offer this kind of money? It's kind of hard for us to, I mean, I have no, it's a change of 20, 30 pounds, isn't it, each option? So, you know, it's not, all money off the liability is good, but it's not going to make anyone jump up for joy. So, I don't know. I mean, that's my opinion. As for my opinion on which option, I'm undecided.
Councillor Smith.
I would support Councillor Grottick in going for option 1 as being the more equitable choice, the most equitable choice.
Thank you. Councillor Watt.
Yes, Chairman, thank you for that. Yes, I support option 1. I just query about the penny on the end. Do we have to write that off because there's no flexibility?
Councillor Mumford.
I would support option 1. I think if, you know, every little helps for the small businesses.
Thank you. Councillor Sims.
I think this is probably a silly question, but I'm going to nonetheless. A number of small businesses are exempt from business tax. Are they included in this as well? I know that sounds, no, they're not. Okay. It wouldn't surprise me though.
Councillor Molson.
I'd just like to reiterate the political point that Councillor Marcus made. I think it's a sop from central government that's really so insignificant that we shouldn't be arguing about it. And I support option one. And I think the fact that the message should go back from our minutes to central government that it's nowhere near enough to support local business at all.
Thank you. So we have a proposer and a seconder for option one. All those in favour? Any against? That's carried. Thank you. Item 17 on our agenda is the financial report, again with our 151 officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, set out in front of you is the financial report for the first quarter. As set out in previous meetings, when I brought the budget monitoring report, I suggested that on a quarterly basis we'd bring a fuller financial report which picks up not only just the revenue budget monitoring report, but also picks up some of the other financial indicators that we should be looking at across the council on a regular basis. So this report is the infancy of that process that I'm introducing, and today we've got a report here that picks up not only the revenue budget monitoring but also reports back on the savings, what we're doing with the capital programme, council tax, business rate collections, water rates, housing rent, the sundry debt position and a treasury management update. I'll briefly run quickly through these because hopefully you've had time to read it, but try and bring out the salient points. The revenue budget monitoring position, the latest forecast end of the first quarter is that we're predicting a net underspend of £70,000 by the end of the year, and that is taking into account, as you'll see further in the report, an under delivery against the savings plan, just under 50,000. That's fairly consistent with what we delivered last year. We delivered an underspend just over 100,000. So if you take it off the actual undelivered savings, we're in a similar level of spend, which does feel quite consistent with what I see around the place at the moment. That 70,000 underspend is an increase in the underspend compared with what we reported in May of 38,000, and you can see the graph there that we anticipate bringing on a regular basis so we can track the position pictorially so that it's easy to spot the issues come in. The actual expenditure to date, variation is slightly more volatile at the moment. We're showing about 187,000 under. I think that goes to show the work that we're still required to do to get more accurately profiled budgets, because we're measuring against pretty much a monthly profile budget, which is just on 12s, where some of the budgets probably need to be finessed a little bit more accurately than that. And there's also a need to have a perhaps more robust method of collecting accruals on a monthly basis. We have a very robust process for the year end. Monthly, it's a little bit quicker and a little bit less resilient. We probably need to work on that, but it's work in progress. If we start reporting on it, we can start picking up those trends and we can start putting the pressure on people to get better information to the accountants. And they also put in the next net spend graph just so that we can see the trend of how we actually spend our money during the year. As I've said, moving on, forecast savings, I brought the savings tracker to the June meeting. I've gone through an update with the senior managers. There are no changes in the actual numbers. We're still anticipating a similar outcome at the moment. There has been an update on some of them in terms of progress, i.e., on one of them we've now managed to surrender the lease, so those savings are more secure. Again, we'll redo that over the next quarter and bring that back as we go. But as it was only done in June, it's probably not surprising only a month later that there isn't a significant change in that position. Capital programme, having reviewed the existing capital programme, compared that with the capital outturn for last year, and looked at the issues over the last couple of years, I came to the conclusion with the Chief Executive that I think the best way forward for the capital programme is to scrap the existing capital programme as published and start and build a new one from scratch. I don't think the existing one is meaningful to what the current operations are of the council. So I've initiated that piece of work with the Chief Executive. We've identified a pro forma document that has gone out to senior managers to collect the information to build a new capital programme from the bottom up. And anticipate we'll bring that back in the next couple of months when it's complete and we've done a full assessment. It will at least make sure that we understand how that's funding and the affordability of that programme going forward, and can feed that into next year's medium-term financial plan process. Council tax collection. We have mentioned previously the collection through questions, but we set out now that after the first quarter, we're slightly ahead. We're just over 1% higher than the profile target. We've collected just over 30% of the council tax to date against a profile target of 29%. That profile target we've used from what Cornwall Council set as our profile target going forward. So we're slightly ahead at the moment. And as one of the things we've mentioned previously, we have now got quite a number of extra people paying by direct debit. I think we're beginning to address some of the small issues that have arisen, and it is now beginning to settle down. We have sent out a number of reminders that has caused a little bit of angst among some people, but hopefully those are now being addressed. I will say that there will be some summonses being sent out in the forthcoming few weeks for amounts that are unpaid and haven't reacted to any of the reminders that have been sent out. So I anticipate that there may be further fallout from general public as those summonses arrive. Just as a brief update, because I will do on the business rate, that strength of collection has increased further in July, so we're even further ahead against the profile for July. Business rate performance, collection here is significantly below target for the first quarter. We only got an actual collection rate of just about 18.5% against a profile target of 34%. I think there are some issues here with the billing, which has created uncertainty in the first instance and created a poor start to the collection process. So we're well behind at the beginning, at the end of the first quarter. Update, which I will bring you for the end of July, is we've now up to an actual position where we're actually achieving 40% collection rate against a target of 42. So we've leapt in 1 month from 18%, 18.5% up to 40%. So it has caught up significantly. We put a lot of resource on that process during July to chase down the businesses, and that's now beginning to give us good results. Water rate collection, pretty much on target. These are spread over, most of these are spread over the 10 months of the year. We collected 45.9% in the first quarter, so we're probably slightly ahead of the target, and everything is going reasonably well, even though, again, with a lot of issues, we slightly poor start in April with some confusion over setting up direct debits for council tax and water rates, which were all done as one in previously, but we split those out. But I think that's now beginning to bed down, and we're getting a reasonably good collection rate. Housing rent collection, slightly different on this one, is that they only get raised on a monthly basis rather than the annual sum. But at the moment, we are pretty much collecting everything that we're raising. The arrears have gone down very slightly from the first quarter, so we got a good collection rate there. Sundry debt position.
May I ask a question before you move on? Given the perceived turmoil regarding direct debits and collections in the first quarter, really, these figures don't really rely that at all. I mean, it seems pretty good, and direct debits have gone up and everything. So it's quite interesting to know that Facebook isn't always totally correct. There certainly were some problems for some individuals.
It's probably, yeah, it is probably correct, but it's a relatively few number create a big stir.
of the number we're collecting, you can see from the figures, the majority is coming in, but the ones that have caused problems, caused people angst, has upset them, and they, you know, it's disappointing that that's happened, but it's a relatively small number, but it's created officer time to deal with those issues. Sundry debt position, significant amount of debt raised in the first quarter. A lot of that is significantly around the airport, the operating unit of the airport. Collection rates were reasonable, but what I will flag up is that the amount overdue has now gone up, and it's up at 436,000, which is the amount that's actually overdue. The total amount, the current balance, is some 769,000. 333,000 of that is less than 30 days, so we wouldn't technically expect to have collected that. But there is now 436,000 overdue. We are starting collection proceedings against some of the long overdue debts, and we are doing a fuller analysis as requested by Chief Executive to identify whether we've got any significant issues with any single customers. Treasury management activity for the period. We haven't done any real treasury management activity for the period. We just had the bank account, which is well in credit due to working capital, to a very positive working capital position. That's delayed the need to borrow, which I think has been discussed previously. We've got an underlying need to borrow. We've got a capital financing requirement that says that we've spent £5 million on capital assets, and we financed that really internally by drawing down cash balances. We do need to rectify that, but while we've got a positive working capital balance, mainly due to the timings of government grants that we've had for additional works and payment of the bills associated with that back to Cornwall Council, I've delayed the borrowing, because obviously no point in borrowing and carrying the extra cost of interest charges if we don't need the cash. And as you're aware, however good you are on the investment markets, you can't make very much at the moment. Very flat. That's the summary of the report. There's an appendix there set out for detailed budget monitoring. The officers' comments on that are there, inclusive, but I don't intend to go through that. It's for information.
Thank you. Councillor Molson.
A couple of questions for the 151 officer. Page 174. I know it's early years and we are very, very insignificant as far as the reporting figures are concerned at the moment. However, the net underspend on year is a little bit concerning, considering we hear a lot that there are staff vacancies. Is that mainly staff vacancies that we're talking about or not?
The majority is probably related to staff vacancies, as I think I've said.
Can we take assurance then that all efforts are being done? Because I know we are under pressure as far as staff is concerned to replace those.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next question, page 179. The figure of £436,000 of overdue invoices is extremely concerning. Can you expand on that, please?
Yeah, it's the sundry debt that's been raised in the period. We've done the collection. We're now doing the analysis of that detailed background behind that. As I say, there's a couple of invoices which we've already identified that we've taken action about. We're doing the full analysis, and when I've got that, I'll share that with members.
Identify where that is at the moment?
We're doing that work at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Watt.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just a brief comment about two-thirds of the way down page 183 in the short paragraph on the IFCA. It describes a spindly lobster, and that describes the fish I've been catching lately. It should be spiny lobster, which in fact is a crawfish.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. I share Councillor Molson's concerns about vacancy rates and wonder if it would be appropriate to have that as a separate standalone heading at the next presentation of a report like this, because it seems to be a recurring theme. And I also remember when we were having various workshops last winter, we frequently came back to the issue. It wasn't so much overspending, it was income from various sectors not coming in as expected, perhaps it was potentially unrealistic. And I was just wondering if there are any variances in income which you haven't alluded to that we might be able to hear more about next time. I know adult social care was an area last time, or over the winter we looked at in detail. Active Silly was a place where we've looked at fees and charges. So if there's anything in income not coming up to forecast, it would be really useful to hear about that sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I think we'll expand the report to take on both those points, the variance between expenditure and income, and we'll pick up the split between the key headings between staff and non-staff costs.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus.
Yeah, I'd like to thank the 151 officer for producing this more easily digestible report. No, finance is never totally digestible, but it's a little bit easier. Reiterate Councillor Molson and Williams' point about page 174, just the underspent. Just want to make sure officers are wary of the impact on service delivery, make sure that we are actually offering services to the highest quality that we can. And the capital programme as well, it'd be good to, it's good to hear that that's going to be rebooted, if you like, what with the work that we're doing with the reinvigorating the corporate plan, which will then inform the medium-term financial plan. Everything can link in together. Nice thing to have lots of golden threads going through the whole thing. And just a reiteration that when the summons do go out, can we make sure the phone system is working and there are enough staff on desks to make sure our queries are answered, because I'm sure people will want to get in touch as quickly as they can.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Further to that point by Councillor Marcus on summons, I'm just slightly concerned about it. Clearly, we want to get our debts in, but if there's been a problem for people to be actually paying, which we know there has been a problem, that could have been a reason for defaulting on payments. So I just want to absolutely be sure that that is the case, that it is bad debt. Just one specific question on page 184 on waste and recycling. There's a line saying that the outturn could be different according to the Tresco residential collection and the curbside recycling. Just want to get a handle on what sort of degrees of budget variance we might be talking about.
Chairman, I think a question for myself. So absolutely, there are potential budget pressures, as we know. We've already had papers before members, both in terms of the implications, potential implications, in terms of taking Tresco's waste. Clearly, that will be an additional cost to the local authority. And likewise as well, because obviously in terms of the curbside collection, there will be changes in terms of how we actually operate the waste management service. So there could be a budget pressure. Obviously, we won't know until we start taking all of Tresco's waste, or certainly their domestic waste. And likewise, we won't know the true implications until we start the full curbside collection rounds, which of course we're hoping to commence in November of this year. So we will be monitoring the situation.
And if you can keep us updated as soon as possible, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Legg.
Thank you, Chairman. Appendix B seems to just, rather than being a commentary, just seems to repeat Appendix A. For example, strategic development and finance just repeats that they're 13,000 underspent. Well, that's all well and good just saying it in words rather than saying it in a table of figures, but it would be interesting to know some detail of why, and this goes back to what everyone else is saying about vacancy holding. It would be interesting to have some reasoning behind the estimated underspend as opposed to just reiterating it.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll take that on board and try and improve that as we go during the year on our journey.
Thank you, Councillor Grottig.
Thank you. I'd just like to support everything really around the table. I think it's been a good discussion and we've brought out quite a lot of salient points from what is, as Councillor Marcus has said, a readable report. So thank you very much for that. The only thing that is left for me to say is I think on page 182 there's a slight typo in the sense that I'm assuming that it should read Adult Services and Park House. There is no reason why the service should not again report a balanced budget position rather than the reverse.
Thank you. So we have a recommendation that members note the first quarter financial report as at the 30th of June 2018, including the forecast savings position. Sorry, Councillor Marcus, thank you. Do we have Councillor Mumford? Thank you, seconder. All those in favour? Any against? That's carried. Thank you. Item 18 on our agenda is the annual governance statement, also in the hands of our 151 officer. Russell, could I ask you to move your mic a little bit closer to you, please, when you're speaking? Thank you very much.
Okay. Yes, thanks, Chair. The annual governance statement. This isn't actually the statement, as I said in previous meeting. We'll bring the statement in the autumn when it's completed, because it's done as part of the process of the closure of the accounts and the statutory accounts. But what was asked at that meeting, I think, was, could we come back with a report to set out what the framework is that we'll be using to produce the annual governance statement, the AGS, this year. So this report basically sets that out. What we're doing is we're picking up and we're using the standard SIPFA publication statement, the way they do it, their framework that they use. And this is based upon 7 principles. They're set out there on page 188 in paragraph 2.2. I'm not going to read them verbatim, but that will form the way that we put the AGS together. That work will be undergoing over the next 6 to 8 weeks, and I anticipate that we're bringing the actual AGS based on this framework to full council in October.
Thank you. Councillor Molson.
I propose that we accept recommendation 1, that the approach to the annual government statement is noted.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Sims. All those in favour? Any against? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Russell, for that. Right, item item 19 on our agenda is a briefing on the proposed merger of Dorset Police with Devon and Cornwall Police in the hands of our Chief Executive Officer. Yeah. Yes, I'd like to invite you to sit at the table with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Unfortunately, the PCC, Alison Hernandez, was not able to join us for personal reasons. However, the PCC office have sent a representation to the Assembly to actually provide the briefing on Ms. Hernandez's behalf. The report in front of you is basically a cover note that goes with the briefing paper. The briefing paper has been developed by the PCC. It's a briefing paper on the proposed merger of Dorset Police and Devon and Cornwall Police. As part of the covering report, there are 3 recommendations that we can have a look at in a minute. I suggest that we allow the office of the PCC to provide a briefing and allow members to have a debate, and then we can come back to the recommendations.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Nikki Allen. I'm the OPCC Treasurer for Devon and Cornwall. As said before, Alison Hernandez is not here today, unfortunately, due to a personal circumstance. I know she would have wanted to be here to speak to you. I won't go through the briefing that you've got in front of you in detail. I'm assuming you've all read it and are happy with it, and I'll be happy to take questions in a moment. I would just like to give a little bit more background to this one. This particular merger is the first PCC-led merger that has been put forward. It is the only voluntary merger that has been being explored within England and Wales. The Scottish Police, when they were brought together, that was not a voluntary merger, that was a directed merger. So this one is on a voluntary basis. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background. At the moment, Devon and Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, we have an alliance with the Dorset Police, and we are currently have 19 functions which are in business areas which have been in an alliance since, well, for the last 5 years. So we've had a number of policing operations. We have roads policing, dogs, firearms, and there are a number of these that are allianced at the moment. The majority of the alliance functions are on back office support. So that would be legal, finance, HR, IT. The proposals that we've got before us today indicate why we're proposing the merger to go forward, what we're looking at with regards to the benefits of such a merger. The alliance teams currently have 25% of the staff across Devon and Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly in allianced functions, so they are already working across the geography. We also work regionally with other police forces on wider public services, so on counter-terrorism, organised crime, procurement. So there are regional functions as well that we would be undertaking. Just a few facts, and I do have a presentation here which we're quite happy to send out to members of the council if you would like. So what we're looking is on Devon, Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, we're looking at 1.72 million population. In Dorset, it's 0.77 million. The combined budget between both forces would be in the region of about 420 million. So those are the sorts of facts that we're looking at. There are some very specific issues that face Devon, Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, and that is around the length of coastline. We have a significant amount of coastline, and we also have a significant roads network, which I think is probably much different to a lot of other forces in the country. You have, within the briefing you have here, you have the key benefits that we are expecting as part of the merged force. I can go through those again, but I don't want to spend the time going through that. If you have questions you want to ask, I'm not quite sure how long you have. With regard to where we are at the moment, we have, the engagement is ongoing at the moment. We have a survey which is available for everybody to complete, which finishes on the 27th of August. So we would encourage people, please, to complete the survey and to feedback via that, as well as other routes. It is clear that via the Home Office they are expecting stakeholders to be engaged and to have their opinions, and they are looking for sufficient support from areas once we decide whether we will put in a full business case. I think you've got in here about what will change if the proposed merger goes ahead, and we will be looking at reduced numbers of chief officers and police crime commissioners. We will be looking at a new operating model, strengthened accountability through single points of leadership, and the development of a 3-county model. So we will be looking at having an HQ within each county. There will be reduced burden when we're looking at things like inspection regimes, external audit, those types of regimes that we would be having. We're looking at more local policing in a national landscape. So having a greater national voice for rural forces, and looking at clearer and quicker decision making, because we would have that single point of leadership. The stakeholder engagement, the areas that we will be looking at or are looking at currently are staff, trade unions, local public, local members of parliament and local authorities. We will also be looking at policing bodies, which would include the inspection regimes, College of Policing and the Police and Crime Panel. And I know you have a representative on the Police and Crime Panel, and this will be debated on Friday. So there will be a special meeting of the Police and Crime Panel on Friday to go through this process and where we are. I won't dwell on everything. I just wanted to, one last thing just to reinforce is who makes the decision and what decision points there are. There are a number of decision points before this can or will be agreed. The first point will be the Police and Crime Commissioner. And she wanted me to reiterate to you that she is listening to everything that comes back from stakeholders. And it is not a foregone conclusion that the business case will go forward. We will be looking at the business case and the story that this is telling and whether this is compelling and whether the business case stacks up, along with stakeholder responses and the engagement that we've had with the communities. And at that point, the commissioners for both Devon and Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly and Dorset will be looking to then decide whether they want to put forward that full business case to the Home Office. If they do decide to do that, it's then the Home Office that will be telling us by Christmas what they call a minded to decision, if they're minded to support the merger going forward. It will then go through to the Home Secretary, it will then go through to Parliament. So there are a number of key decision-making points before we actually get to the point where it is agreed. It will have to form the basis of a statutory instrument because this will need to go before Parliament to change the boundaries of the police force. So as I said, there's a number of key decision-making points. I've scooted through this a little bit, but I thought it was probably more important to give time for questions and any comments that everybody might have. You do have on here how to contact us. You do have the survey. Please do get in touch with us, but I'm happy to take questions. I will say that I may not be able to answer all of them. The Police and Crime Commissioner would have been better set, but I will answer as much as I can for you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you very much, Chairman. If the full merger were to go ahead, there are anticipated savings expected. Could you therefore give assurances that residents of Scilly would pay no more through the police precept as a result of the merger?
There are anticipated savings. Day one, we're looking at being about 3.2 to 3.4 million, which will be reinvested back into services. I'm not going to be in a position to say that council taxpayers wouldn't have to pay more. We do have a gap between the rate of council tax for Devon and Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly and the rate of council tax for Dorset, and that's £18. There have been no decisions made on how that gap will be bridged at this point. It doesn't necessarily mean that Devon and Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly will go up by £18. It could be Dorset coming down. It could be a variation between that. And that's what will be looked at as part of the business case. Unfortunately, I'm not in a position to give you that assurance at this point in time about the council tax precept. Once we've done the full business case and whether that's accepted or not, there will be further engagement with communities once that full business case has been done during next year. I'm not in a position to give that assurance at the moment, I'm afraid.
You, Councillor Sims.
This strikes me as essentially it's an administrative process and a bit more centralisation. I cannot imagine really it would make any difference to us really on the ground. I mean, is that very likely? I can't envisage that at all.
That's probably highly likely, is that the Commissioner has made assurances through her plan and through the estate strategy that we have, that where we are in communities at the moment, we would not be looking to pull out of communities. You will probably see at least what you have on the front line now, but what we are looking for is for efficiencies and savings to be put back into frontline policing. How that will affect the Isles of Scilly, I'm not sure, but locally in the community, you are unlikely to see any change to what you have. Even though it may be more centralised, we still have a BCU commander for Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. That will still be the same. So we will still have those services coming under those structures.
Thank you. Councillor Mumford.
You say there won't be any change. There probably won't be any change to our policing here. I would just like to, I've got sort of 3 questions that are run into one. Would you like me to give them to you all in one go? Okay. After 2 incidences on Saturday night, I want to know why there was no physical police presence for a period of 38 hours. Do you think this is acceptable? And how often has this happened in the last 2 to 3 years? Are there other local policing teams where there is an absence of a physical presence occurs more than 24 hours? There's no physical presence for 24 hours anywhere else in Cornwall or Devon. The situation in Scilly is somewhat different from the mainland Cornwall and Devon, as we are 40 miles out in the Atlantic. A physical presence of policing should be 24 hours a day, and that should be absolutely necessary. So we need more police, we need specials. Newquay and the Isles of Scilly have roughly the same amount of licensed premises. Do Newquay operate with 1 police present? And would there be 38 hours with no police presence on the street? Physical presence on the street prevents crime, and surely this is what we would like to try and do. Extra police during the summer months would also be needed. So there would always be someone physically visible on duty. What assurances can be provided to protect our police presence? That's one question. The second question, the survey. I don't think the survey was very good. The preamble is overlong and not written in everyday language accessible to residents. All the statements invite agreement. The option is preferring a strategic alliance over a member is not presented, yet it is necessary to ensure balance. How will responses be analysed? Will they be grouped favourably or unfavourably? Will there be a new survey? And I would just like to emphasise that I think we should really look into having a bobby on the beat. The incident that happened is actually to my own business, my husband and my own business. On Sunday morning when I went to work, I found that the window had been broken. I could not get in touch with the police. I went up to the police station. I eventually had to phone 101. I got through to a policeman who said, "I'll put you through to the crime division." I waited 10 minutes and I could wait no longer. When I saw the sergeant who came down at 8 o'clock on Monday morning, I asked him when he went off duty. He said he went off duty at 6 o'clock on Saturday night, and he didn't appear on duty again till 8 o'clock on Monday morning. Now that is not acceptable, not to have any police presence in our streets on a Saturday night, because if the police had been present, this incident probably wouldn't have happened.
Thank you.
I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to answer some of your questions, and I may have to come back on some of these. Unfortunately, I'm very sorry I won't be able to. But the operational deployment of policing comes under the Chief Constable, and as such, the Police and Crime Commissioner isn't responsible for the deployment. But I will take back the comments to the Chief Constable on those aspects of it. I can't comment on the specific incident because I don't know the background to the 38 hours absence. So I would have to look into that one. Would it be okay if I looked into that one and came back to you? Because I would have to look into the incident. With regards to the survey, we are looking at answers individually and whether they're coming back favourably or not. The answer to will there be a new survey, not in this round of engagement. If we'd put out another survey, it would have been confusing. We would not have been able to get a consistent answer from the people answering at the beginning of I think we started on the 29th of June, to those answering on the 27th of August. So unfortunately, the weaknesses in the survey will be there. I had two questions. Was there another one? Did I miss one?
No. Well, I have another question that's not related to what I've just said. Can you confirm that the Isles of Scilly will have a seat at the table on policy matters? And what is the current situation and how will this change under the proposed merger? How will the police and crime panels facilitate effective democratic challenge to the PCC?
The police and crime panels, as far as I'm aware, have to have a member from each local authority within their area. So the Isles of Scilly would have a member on a new police and crime panel. It obviously would cover a larger geographic area, and it is something we have to look at. As you will probably be aware, Dorset are going through a reorganisation at the moment, so we are currently looking at how it would be formed and how it would be governed. We are more than happy to receive a response from the Isles of Scilly Council, rather than just a survey. If there are more things that you want to be able to voice and put forward, we are looking for responses from all of the councils if there's specific issues you would like to bring up. So you don't have to do it just by the survey. For local authorities, we would like you to come back to us and give a fuller response if you would like to.
Thank you. Councillor Nellams.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Nikki, for coming at such short notice. And I'd just like to say before I ask a question, I sat with Lynn and Nikki all afternoon, and various people came in. And I must say, the one overriding question was, how will it affect our police here and the numbers of police that we have? And I think Nikki's answered it already in saying that it's very unlikely that that will change, although Councillor Mumford's question maybe begs another question: do we need more police? I'm not sure, but I'm sure that will come out. I'd like to ask, though, on the financial implications, it does say that the proposal of the PCC may have implications for the future funding of the Community Safety Partnership. Having sat and sitting on that, I must say, actually, that I've always found huge support for all the various agencies and people that come in on that, and that has been very strong. But I just wonder if you could answer that question, that it will continue to be strong. So it's on page 206, number 6, on financial implications, because there are a lot of agencies that come in on that. And as I say, I've always seen great support for all those different agencies that make up that partnership.
The Commissioner is committed to the community safety partnerships and sees those as a very strong voice with regard to the work with the police. I don't think that is going to change in any future arrangement. There are similar arrangements within Dorset Police, again, very strong, so we don't see that changing through the bringing together of the two forces.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus.
Yeah, just a couple of comments to kind of reiterate what's been said around the table already. Councillor Sims was talking about collaboration, and I'm all up for collaboration. It's just kind of funny in this time when we're having messages about taking back control being rammed down our throats from people, that we're creating a bigger organisation. My experience of bigger organisations is that they are more dysfunctional. They don't work, they disconnect from the people they're actually trying to help. And just about the documentation and the survey, there was a lack of transparency about what would the negatives be about the merger. There's nothing about that there, and that kind of tells me that either the people writing it are unsure about what the negatives are going to be, or they don't want to tell us what the negatives are going to be, and that makes me nervous about how well this thing's been planned and what the reasons are behind the proposals. So, yeah, so those are my comments, basically.
Thank you. Councillor Grottick.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick point. I think you've already it's been articulated that the main concern for our small community is that they have their service provision protected, and we would certainly, I think, be looking for those assurances in as firm a way as we could have. I'd just like to support option 3, that it seems eminently sensible to wait until we have a little bit more financial detail before we actually formally propose whether or not we would be supportive of such a move. So I think that's sensible. And perhaps I'm a little bit suspicious, but it seems to me that if you amalgamate and immediately make big savings, central government will probably say, well, do you know what, you don't need so much funding. In which case, you might be worse off than you were before.
Thank you. Councillor Molson.
There are 3 major worries at the moment as far as national government is concerned, local government, police authorities and what have you, and the 3 worries are Brexit, Brexit and Brexit. With such a large merger between the forces, may it not be prudent that we postpone any significant changes until we know what the outcome of Brexit is?
During our discussions with the Home Office, we have been talking about Brexit and the impact of Brexit on any of this process or on the potential for the merger. So it is first and foremost our front about talking about the impact of the Brexit. The process that we would need to follow so that members are aware is around what they call a negative statutory instrument. So it doesn't necessarily need to be debated in Parliament. It would only be debated in Parliament if somebody opposes it. So we're not looking at it being potentially taking up Parliament time, but I do take your point about the significant changes that may be coming forward with Brexit. It is something that is on our risk register as we are discussing the full business case.
Thank you. Right, we have 3 recommendations which I intend to take together. That members take note of the appended briefing paper on the proposed merger of Dorset Police with Devon and Cornwall Police. That members take the opportunity to ask questions of the Police and Crime Commissioner, Alison Hernandez. Obviously, she is not here, but that doesn't stop members from questioning her in due course. And the 3rd recommendation is that the Council provides a formal response to the proposals once the business plan for the proposed merger has been completed. So could I please have a proposer? Councillor Nellams.
I'd like to propose that, Chairman.
Thank you. I could have a seconder, please. Councillor Grottick. All those in favour? Any against? That's carried. Thank you very much for your time and your report. The time now is 8:38 and we will close the meeting. Thank you.